One of the things I love about Phoibos is that they actively seek out honest feedback of their products, both good and bad, rather than some companies that outrightly ignore or even get defensive on negative criticism. Phoibos seems to take it to heart. They listen, and then take that information and try to use it to improve moving forward, not just on their newest watches, but to improve their current lineup as well. And we've seen this before when I looked at their upgraded version of the PY010C quartz diver. And today we're going to see it again as I look at their 2.0 version of their Wavemaster. The first version of the Wavemaster came out about a year ago, and I believe it's Phoibos' first attempt at trying to make an original design. Now, I never owned one, but I did go back and look at some of the early reviews, most of which were rather positive. Generally, people love the dial and the super engineer bracelet that came with it. Now, Ethan from Phoibos contacted me about a month ago and asked if I'd like to take a look at this newest version, and I of course said yes. So again, a huge thank you to him for sending this over. But in the process, I also asked him what was different about this version from the last, and from the sound of it, pretty much every aspect of the watch has been fine-tuned. According to him, they switched manufacturers and improved the finishing of the case, as well as improved the lume and the turning action of the bezel, as well as enlarged the hour indicators and added an embossed crown and case back. One of the biggest concerns on the older version was about the screw pins that held together the bracelet. Now, generally people love the super engineer bracelet, but the screws used were rather small, so here they've been enlarged to make it easier to size. As of right now, I believe only the black dial versions have been upgraded, and that's the PY009C without a date, and this one, the PY010C with a date. And there is a little bit of a price increase over the original version because of these upgrades. But we have a lot to cover, so let's just jump right in and start to take a look at the dimensions and the case. As divers go these days, the Wavemaster has a standard footprint, with a width of 42mm without the crown and 45mm width. Lug to lug is 48.4, which is really what I prefer, as it seems to be perfect for my 7-inch wrist. Now, as thickness goes, it is a bit tall. Phoibos' site lists it at 14mm, which is what I think the original is. Yet when I measure it, it's much closer to 15mm at 14.9. One reason for that change could be the case back, which has this extremely cool, deeply embossed Kraken octopus logo on it. It has a nice two-tone effect with both brushed and polished surfaces, and there is at least a 0.5 millimeter height difference between the brushed background and the polished octopus. So I'd say they get some major style points here for that case back, but it's not something you see while wearing it, and I'm sure a lot of people, myself included, would have preferred it to be just slightly thinner. Yet I will say that I love the detail work put into that case back. Anyway, lug width is 22mm, so it's rather standard for a diver. And it has a water resistance of 300 meters, which is one of the main reasons for it being as tall as it is. Weight here is a rather solid 214 grams, and that's with all the links on its bracelet. And price is currently listed at $259 from Phoibos' site. The case is 3/16 stainless with a mostly brushed finish, with the exception of the side. I believe the side on the original version was mostly polished. And here, only the top and bottom angled sections of the case are polished, maintaining a very tool watch appearance with the brushed sides and bracelet. Yet that thin polished edge highlights the overall case shape of the watch, and I think it gives it a great two-tone appearance and light. The finishing is great for the price, and I really like the look of the case. The helm Komodo is about the same height, and one of my complaints about it was that at 40mm wide, it looked tall. It just looked a bit off proportionally. While here, I think the watch looks really good. Perhaps it's because the case is a little more rounded, or that the bezel sticks out just slightly beyond the case. Either way, I think it looks good, and it feels rather balanced when you wear it. Another change is an updated crown. It has a brushed finish and is lightly embossed with the Phoibos logo. It's screw down as you would expect, with some nice knurling giving it a great texture as you try to manipulate it. Size here is just right. It's not too big, not too small, and it's easy to get a hold of, especially with no crown guards, which here I think gives the case a more streamlined shape. One more thing about the crown, however. But for me, a watch always gets bonus points if the logo is pointed upright when it's screwed in. You'd be surprised at how often this doesn't happen. The crystal here is a flat sapphire with AR coating, and I'll say this here, that sapphire and the ceramic black bezel are beautiful looking, yet they can be fingerprint magnets. Onto the bezel, which as I said has a ceramic insert in black matching that dial, which at this price range, ceramic is always a bonus. As bezels go, this has minimal markings and Arabics, yet is nicely lumed, but more on that later. It is a very nice coin edge that sticks out just slightly beyond the case, which also makes it very easy to grip and rotate. It's unidirectional and 120 click. The bezel action is one thing that's listed as an upgrade, and I've never experienced the original, so I can't say that with certainty. I can say, however, that it is very easy to get a hold of and very easy to rotate. It feels very nice and solid as you turn it, with a very beautiful, satisfying click. The problem, however, is that there is a bit of backplay to that bezel, at least more than I would like. Now, I do want to stress that the action itself as you rotate it is very nice and feels better than other divers I've had. It's just that you can almost go back a full minute from when you hear the click. I'd say that this is my biggest and really only complaint about the Wavemaster. And I'd say this is more surprising because Phoiboses in general don't have any backplay whatsoever. So it's a little disappointing, but I wouldn't say it's a deal killer in any way. The rest of the watch is really good. Especially the dial, which is really the star and where this piece gets its name. It's a black textured dial with a very, very slight sunburst effect. It's almost unnoticeable until you get it into full sunlight. But what's more obvious and eye-catching is the wavy grooves that cover the dial. And it's the edges of those grooves that really catch and reflect the light, which gives us a very distinct and striking visual appearance. I think most people's impression of the Wavemaster will really come from the first glance of this dial and that wavy pattern. Even if you're not a fan of the rest of the color scheme or the height, you may be willing to forgive that for the waves on the dial. One of the upgrades listed was that the indices were made slightly bigger. And comparing this to a picture of the blue version, which I think is still the original model, I'd say it might be, but not by much. Currently, I'd say the indices are just the right size. You want them easily distinguishable, which from the light blue coloring, this easily accomplishes. But you don't want them so big that it covers too much of that wavy dial. The top of the dial you have the Phoibos logo in white for a very stark contrast, which is followed up by automatic in 300 meters on the south end. The logo may be a little big, but I think it looks pretty good proportionally. Looking again at the older model, the indices at the 12 were 2 bars that were just applied next to each other. And here it's one piece, and I really like how it looks with the silver outline just between those 2 bars. I also prefer and appreciate a date at the 6. It just seems to flow better symmetrically. And here they did a very good job with a small, subtle amount of framing. It outlines it nicely without disrupting the pattern of the dial. If I'm being perfectly honest, I've never been a fan of Mercedes hands. There's nothing wrong with them. I just think they're a bit overdone, so I'm glad to see that Phoibos chose something else here, and I always love syringe hands. They have a silver outline, and again with the same light powder blue looking lume that the indices have, which is followed up by a very orange second hand that has a light blue lollipop as a counterweight. The length on these hands is perfect, the hour hands going right up to but not quite the indices, while the minute and second hands are the same length and go right to the chapter ring. And that raised chapter ring surrounds the dial with minute indicators in an orange that matches that second hand. Let's talk color scheme and design for a second. Now, out of the original series, I think blue may have been the more popular version, but I prefer black. And in some ways, this seems to be a combination of 2 of my favorite divers, the Vostok Orange Scuba Dude and the Helm Komodo with its powder blue indices. And that's a color that the Phoibos Sea Nymph also shares that I really liked. I wouldn't think combining those 2 color schemes would work, or even be a good idea, yet here it does. And in many ways, I think Phoibos needed to do something like this with the hands and indices. Something that stands out on its own without being overly large and thus distracting from the dial. The color scheme here may not be for everyone, but it's vibrant and offers a stark contrast in colors, making it very easy to use. To me, the height of the watch already says that this is a summer watch. It's not really going to be something you want to wear under a winter coat or too many long sleeve shirts. And I think the color scheme here solidifies that. It's a color scheme that's slightly playful when you look at it up close, yet still moderately conservative with a black on black color scheme at first glance. While the dots and bar indices are a little subby-like, that's where it stops. And that's where the Wavemaster starts to develop its own personality, and starts to become something that is distinctly Phoibos. Movement-wise, this uses a Seiko NH35A, which I think is the best option for a true tool watch. It's affordable, reliable, robust, 40-hour power reserve with hacking and hand winding. This specific one was losing about 4.8 seconds a day. Now, I preferred if it was gaining that, but honestly, anytime a watch is within 5 seconds, I'm very happy. Now, let's talk lume before we get to the bracelet, and the lume here is fantastic. It's listed as a mixture of dark blue and BG29 Swiss Superluminova. It has a light blue-green appearance, and everything is clear and bright. Not to mention that I always love the two-tiered look you get with a lumed bezel. For a comparison, I threw this up against some steep competition: a Seiko Dark Knight Turtle, a Helm Komodo, and a Seiko Ice Monster. The indices on the Wavemaster are not as big, so it's not initially as bright, at least not to the point of lighting up the chapter ring or dial. Yet it's still very distinct and clear, and it maintains that after 40 minutes. So I can say that this is one that will definitely last you through the night. Now, I'd say it's better than the Ice Monster and maybe about even with the Turtle. I think the Komodo might be slightly brighter, yet I think the blue-green lume color on the Wavemaster makes it clearer and easier on the eyes. Now, one word of warning: if you're planning on using this watch with an aftermarket NATO, you may need some curved or bent spring bars. The clearance between the spring bars and the case is very tight. I even had to use them on this 1.2mm single pass. The good news, however, is that the bracelet is fantastic, and you may never want to take it off. I love the look of an engineer bracelet, and I think it's great that they include one here. Its brushed finish perfectly matches the case. There's a very nice solid feel with solid end links, although those end links are a little rough on the inside, but that's something you never see. As I mentioned earlier, the links are secured with screws rather than push pins. And where the previous version had very small screws, here I think they're good. I had no problem sizing it whatsoever. The edges of the bracelet are a little sharp, but the signed push button clasp is very good. And another bonus, that clasp is milled, which is great when you consider the price. The nice thing about an engineer bracelet is that the shorter 5-link design really conforms and folds perfectly around your wrist, which gives it a very nice and comfortable feel. As tall and heavy as the Wavemaster is, it doesn't wear like it. You notice that the weight is there, but overall it feels very nicely balanced. Visually, if you're looking at it from the side, it does look tall, and I'd still be careful wearing it while working on something. The sapphire and ceramic should prevent a lot of scratches, but I'm always overly cautious. Overall, I think the Wavemaster is a great piece, and my only real concern has to do with the backplay on the bezel. And as I said before, I think people's decision on whether they'd want one or not really relies on their first impression of that wavy dial. If you like it, then I think you'd enjoy the watch. If not, then you might be wanting to look at something else, such as a Phoibos Eagle Ray. In fact, I think the Eagle Ray might be the biggest competition for the Wavemaster. For a little bit more, you can get a fantastic looking watch with a high-beat Miyota 9015 that's just a little smaller and thinner. Otherwise, as affordable watches go, I think the Wavemaster is on the higher end of that spectrum, but you're getting pretty much everything you could want and nothing you'd really want to upgrade. You're getting sapphire, ceramic bezel, and a great super engineer bracelet. I would think an upgraded version of the blue dial will eventually be coming, but as far as I know, only the black dial Wavemaster is the 2.0 version right now. So if you're interested in a blue one, make sure you email Phoibos before ordering anything just to make sure. Anyway, let me know in a comment what you think about the Phoibos Wavemaster, or if there's another diver that's captured your attention. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for joining me.